The history of aviation has written some of its darkest chapters on October 31st. From Mexico City to the Sinai Peninsula, from the waters off Nantucket to the runways of Taiwan, Halloween has witnessed an unsettling pattern of aerial catastrophe. Today we're exploring the grim chronology of Halloween aviation disasters. Since 1979, nearly 800 lives have been lost in aviation disasters. These are stories of human error, mechanical failure, terrorism, and the razor-thin margin between routine flight and absolute catastrophe. And surprisingly, amidst all this darkness, October 31st, 2000 also marked one of humanity's greatest achievements in space. Hello, and welcome to Deadliest Disasters. Our story begins on Halloween morning, 1979 in Mexico City. Western Airlines Flight 2605, affectionately nicknamed the Night Owl, was making its routine approach from Los Angeles. The McDonnell Douglas DC-10, a wide-body jet that could carry hundreds of passengers, was descending through thick morning fog toward Mexico City International Airport. The airport sits at an elevation of 7,320 feet or 2,230 meters. It was 5:42 a.m. local time, and visibility was almost non-existent. What the crew didn't know, or perhaps couldn't tell in the fog and darkness, was that they were lined up for the wrong runway. Runway 23 left was closed for maintenance. There were workers, there were vehicles. There were obstacles that had no business being in the path of a landing aircraft. The DC-10 touched down, and then it struck a maintenance vehicle, killing the worker inside instantly. The impact tore the aircraft apart. It careened down the runway, breaking apart as it went. Of the 88 people on board, 72 died in the wreckage, plus that one maintenance worker on the ground. 73 lives lost in total because of fog, confusion, and a closed runway. It was a horrific start to Halloween's dark aviation legacy, but it wouldn't be the last. 15 years later, Halloween 1994 in Roselawn, Indiana. Flat farmland stretching to the horizon under gray October skies. American Eagle Flight 4184 was an ATR-72 turboprop, operating as a connector flight from Indianapolis to Chicago. It was quick and routine, the kind of flight that happens thousands of times a day across America. 68 people were on board, travelers heading home, families starting the Halloween weekend. But no one predicted what would happen next. The aircraft encountered severe icing conditions while in a holding pattern. Ice accumulated on the wings and on the control surfaces, in places where ice should never be. The ATR-72, while a reliable aircraft in normal conditions, had a vulnerability, a susceptibility to ice buildup that could have catastrophic consequences. At 4 p.m., the aircraft suddenly rolled to the right. Not a gentle bank, but a violent, uncontrollable roll. The plane flipped upside down and entered a high-speed dive. The pilots fought the controls, but there was nothing they could do. Physics had taken over. Flight 4184 impacted a soybean field at tremendous speed. The force was so great that the aircraft disintegrated on impact. All 68 people on board died instantly. The wreckage was scattered across the muddy field. This crash led to significant changes in how aircraft handle icing conditions. But for the families who lost loved ones that Halloween, those changes came too late. 2 years later, Halloween 1996, Sao Paulo, Brazil. The most populous city in the Americas, where the Congonhas Airport sits surrounded by dense residential neighborhoods. TAM Flight 402, a Fokker 100 jet, was departing for what should have been a routine multi-stop journey to Recife. 95 people were on board. The engines roared and the aircraft lifted off the runway, climbing into the morning sky. But then, just 25 seconds after takeoff, something went catastrophically wrong. The right side engine reversed thrust during the climb. This is something that should never ever happen. Thrust reversers are used on landings to help slow the aircraft down, not during takeoff when you need every ounce of power pushing you forward. The Fokker 100 immediately lost lift. It stalled and it rolled uncontrollably to the right. The pilots had no time to react and no altitude to recover. The aircraft plummeted from the sky, slamming into residential buildings and houses in a heavily populated neighborhood. The death toll? All 95 on board, plus 4 people on the ground. Families in their homes, starting their Halloween morning, suddenly found themselves in the middle of an aviation disaster. It remains the 4th deadliest accident in Brazilian aviation history and the worst ever involving a Fokker 100. Halloween 1996 brought horror not just to those in the sky, but to those on the ground who never expected terror to rain down from above. Halloween 1999 and New York City. We're now at the threshold of a new millennium, and this next incident remains one of aviation's most controversial and mysterious disasters. EgyptAir Flight 990 departed JFK Airport in New York, bound for Cairo, Egypt. It was a Boeing 767, a modern, reliable aircraft. 217 passengers and crew were on board, heading across the Atlantic on an overnight flight. Approximately 30 minutes after takeoff at 1:50 a.m., something happened in the cockpit. The aircraft suddenly pitched nose down into a steep dive. A violent, rapid plunge toward the dark Atlantic waters below. The flight data recorder captured something chilling. The autopilot being disconnected, followed by the aircraft entering a dive. Some crew members were heard on the cockpit voice recorder, but the exact sequence of events became the subject of intense debate between American and Egyptian investigators. The NTSB concluded that the relief first officer's flight control inputs caused the crash, suggesting deliberate action or an act of terrorism. The Egyptian authorities adamantly disagreed, claiming mechanical failure of the elevator control system. But the truth, nearly 26 years later, we still don't have consensus. What we know for sure is that Flight 990 impacted the Atlantic Ocean about 60 miles south of Nantucket Island, traveling at tremendous speed. The aircraft broke apart on impact, and all 217 people on board died. Their bodies and the wreckage sank into the cold Atlantic waters, taking most answers with them. It remains EgyptAir's deadliest disaster and one of Halloween's most haunting mysteries. Moving on to the year 2000, Halloween at the turn of the millennium, and on this single day, humanity experienced both the heights of achievement and the depths of tragedy. Let's start with the tragedy in Taipei, Taiwan. A typhoon was currently battering the island. Chiang Kai-shek International Airport is operating in terrible conditions. Heavy rain, strong winds, and poor visibility. Singapore Airlines Flight 006, a Boeing 747-400, the largest passenger jet of its time, was preparing to depart for Los Angeles via a stop in Singapore. 179 people were on board, and it was 11:18 p.m. local time. The crew lined up for takeoff, and they advanced the throttles. The massive jet accelerated down the runway through the typhoon's fury, but there was a problem, a catastrophic problem that should never happen. They were on the wrong runway. Runway 05R was closed for construction. There was large, heavy construction machinery on it, and the 747 was racing directly toward it at takeoff speed, but the pilots could not see it in the dense rain. The collision was inevitable. The aircraft slammed into the construction equipment, tearing the plane apart. Fuel ignited and fire erupted. The 747 broke into pieces on the runway. 83 people died. 98 initially survived, though 2 more would later die from injuries. It was the first fatal crash of a 747-400 and Singapore Airlines' first fatal accident. A reminder that even the world's most prestigious carriers and most advanced aircraft are not immune. But earlier that same day, on Halloween of 2000, something remarkable happened. At 7:52 a.m., on a launch pad in Kazakhstan, a Soyuz rocket ignited and lifted off from Earth. Inside the Soyuz TM-31 spacecraft were 3 people: Russian cosmonauts Yuri Gudzenko and Sergei Krikalev, and American astronaut William Shepard. Their destination was the International Space Station. This wasn't just another mission, this was Expedition 1, the beginning of permanent human habitation in space. When they docked with the ISS on November 2nd, they began an unbroken chain of human presence in space that continues to this day. As you watch this video, humans are living aboard the ISS, a legacy that began on Halloween 2000. October 31st, 2000 saw tragedy in Taiwan, but it also saw humanity take one of its greatest leaps forward, proving that even on aviation's darkest date, the human spirit of exploration endures. Fast forward to 2014 in the deserts of California. The dream of commercial space tourism was tantalizingly close. Virgin Galactic's Spaceship Two, named VSS Enterprise after the Star Trek vessel, was conducting test flights in the Mojave Desert. On Halloween Day, the Enterprise was on a powered test flight, released from its mothership high above the desert floor. 2 test pilots were aboard, Michael Alsbury and Peter Siebold. Everything was going according to plan until 11 seconds after the Enterprise was released from its mothership. The feathering system, a mechanism designed to help the spacecraft descend safely, deployed early, at too high of a speed and too high of an altitude. The premature deployment of the feathering system tore the spacecraft apart in midair. VSS Enterprise broke up in what looked like an explosion. Michael Alsbury died in the destruction. Peter Siebold miraculously survived, ejected from the disintegrating spacecraft and parachuting to the ground with serious injuries. He became part of the first spacecraft crew to experience a fatality where someone survived. The NTSB investigation revealed that premature deployment of the feathering system caused the disaster, but also faulted the spacecraft's design for lacking fail-safe mechanisms. The dream of space tourism took a serious blow that Halloween, a reminder that the frontier of space is still incredibly dangerous. And now we arrive at Halloween 2015, the deadliest incident in our chronology, Metrojet Flight 9268. It's early morning, October 31st. An Airbus A321 sits at Sharm el-Sheikh International Airport in Egypt, a popular Red Sea resort destination. The aircraft is full of Russian tourists, 212 Russians, 4 Ukrainians, and 1 Belarusian, plus 7 Russian crew members. 224 people total, most of them families returning home to St. Petersburg after fall vacation. At 6:13 a.m. local time, the Airbus lifts off, climbing into the clear morning sky over the Sinai Peninsula. 23 minutes later, at 28,000 feet, the aircraft explodes. No engine failure, no structural problem, but a gigantic explosion. The Airbus A321 disintegrates over the northern Sinai, raining debris across the desert below. All 224 people on board presumed instantly dead. The terror group ISIS, Sinai's branch, immediately claimed responsibility. At first, there's skepticism. How could a terrorist group bring down an airliner at such a high cruising altitude? But the evidence mounts. British and American intelligence agencies suspect a bomb, and Russian investigators find explosive residue. Eventually, they conclude that an improvised explosive device containing up to 1 kilogram of TNT was smuggled aboard at the airport and detonated during flight. In February 2016, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi acknowledged that terrorism caused the crash. But here's where it gets strange. In March 2020, an Egyptian appeals court ruled that the crash was not an act of terrorism and dismissed lawsuits against government's officials and the airline. They claimed the identities of the victims could not be officially established. As of 2025, no final report has been produced. 224 people dead, a terrorist attack acknowledged by multiple governments, and yet officially Egypt disputes it. The families of the victims remain in limbo. Their loved ones lost on Halloween in an attack that some authorities still won't fully acknowledge. Nearly 800 lives lost in 7 air disasters on one specific date, October 31st. We've seen mechanical failure, pilot error, weather conditions, terrorism, and design flaws. Each disaster has its own unique causes, but together they paint a picture of an industry that must remain internally vigilant, because when things go wrong in the sky, the consequences are deadly. Thank you all for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover. This has been Deadliest Disasters.